Buenos días. ¿Cómo están? Me llamo Jaime Casap, but we're going to do this one in English. I am the Education Evangelist at Google. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited. This is my first time in Spain. I've been in Barcelona for the last couple of days looking for Leo Messi. Couldn't find him. Now we're down here in Valencia. We drove down. My wife came with me. I travel 200,000 miles a year. She never comes with me. She came with me because it's Spain, and we drove down, and we were renting a car from the rental car agency in Barcelona, and the person is like, it's a manual. And I go, yeah, that's okay. And she's like, no, it's a manual. She starts showing me charts and videos because I'm an American, and apparently I can't drive a manual. But I drive a manual at home. So we drove down, beautiful country, excited to drive back on Wednesday. So we're here for a couple of days. Thank you very much for having me here. As I mentioned, I am the Education Evangelist at Google. I've been at Google for 12 years, part of the team. And when I say team, it was just two of us that launched Google Apps into the education space, universities, and then K-12, and then a bunch of other tools. My job is to work across all the different teams at Google that are doing things in education on the back end to make sure that we're trying to build the right kinds of things, that we're taking feedback from educators, that we're taking feedback from students, and at the same time, be external and understand what's happening in the space and doing what we can to promote the ways that technology can impact education. Besides my role at Google, I'm also part of an organization called inquiryschools.org. It's an organization focused on building inquiry schools, and that is one of the schools that we helped build. This is a school I helped build in Phoenix, Arizona, called the Phoenix Coding Academy, where we took computer science and we embedded into all the subjects in the school, and it's cross-disciplinary. So it's not a computer science course, it's history and computer science, and art and computer science, and biology and computer science. And they work on projects based on those subjects with computer science as the language that they use in the school. So this is not a specialty school, it's not a private school, it's not a charter school in the United States, it's a regular high school inside the Phoenix Union School District. I was part of a team that launched this school in Phoenix. Besides launching the school in Phoenix, I also teach in this school. I'm the 10th grade communications teacher in the school. And I don't know if any of you have spent a lot of time thinking about what it's like to teach. I spend a lot of time thinking about this, and I tell people who don't teach what teaching is like, and I compare it to golf. And I don't know how many of you golf, but in golf, you could have a terrible day. You can go out and hit parked cars. You can go out and knock out trees and kill birds. You can go out and have a miserable day in golfing. And then you hit one shot, and it lands on the green 2 feet away from the hole, and you just walk up and you putt it in, and you say, I'm coming back tomorrow. That's what teaching is like to me. Because you could have a terrible day of teaching, or you think your students don't get your messages, or they're working on projects and you're trying to help them and they're frustrated and you're going back and forth. And I teach all day. So I teach 3 classes, 90 students. At the end of the day, you're exhausted. And you're like, this is not working. And then you go home and you see a tweet like this from one of the parents. And you're like, yes, I can't wait to go back tomorrow. This is the impact that we can have with education and teachers. And sometimes we don't think about that. Now, why do we gather at events like this? I hope we gather at events like this to talk about the importance of education, why education matters so much. And I believe the reason we talk about education is because we understand that education disrupts poverty. Education changes a family's destiny. Education is what is at the root of the communities that we're trying to build. And for me, it's a personal passion. This is my life work. Because I am one of the kids that we often talk about when we talk about kids growing up in poverty. I am a first-generation American. My mother went to New York from Argentina, escaping government oppression, escaping poverty. I was born and raised in a community called Hell's Kitchen, New York. Yes, if that name tells you anything, it's true. It's Hell's Kitchen, New York. Not the greatest place to grow up. And I grew up on welfare and social services and food stamps and all government assistance, and not the greatest place to raise a family back in New York in the 70s and 80s. But the great thing about a place like New York is that you have people working in all aspects of life, and so you could see what success looks like. You could see that success were the people who were successful were people who had degrees, people who were doing things, certifications, they had some type of professional experience behind them, and I decided that that's what I was gonna do. I was gonna buckle down, get my degree, go to college, go to graduate school, and I get to stand in front of you because of that, because of education. Now, I've had a pretty amazing life. Being in Spain, this is my first time in Spain. It's always growing up in a place like Hell's Kitchen, New York, everywhere you go is the first place you've ever been. I get to do some amazing things in my life. I've had some amazing experiences because of education. This is why I'm so passionate about education. And I had one moment that stood out above all of the other moments that I've been able to have in my career over the last 20, 25 years, when the First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama, called me. I know I don't remember the conversation, but she called me to ask me to come speak at an event that she was having in the White House. It was part of her Reach Higher initiative, where she was getting students together that were like me, students that were growing up in bad communities, students that were on the cusp, that were at risk, students that were about to graduate, had the potential to graduate from high school, but beyond that, they had the potential to go to college. And she asked me to come to the White House and speak to those students and all the organizations that support those students. And I said, let me check my calendar. No, you don't do that. You say yes, you go. And then you go and you show up and you realize that this is happening in the East Room of the White House. And this is what it looks like when you're speaking in the East Room of the White House, behind those gold curtains, in front of those gold curtains with George Washington staring at the back of your neck, and you're standing there in front of the president and the first lady and all these students and all the organizations. I don't remember any of this. I was nervous through the whole thing. And when I posted this picture and my friends saw this picture, they weren't impressed that I spoke at the White House, right? Your friends aren't supposed to be impressed. They were impressed that I owned a suit, though. That's the one suit right there. That's the suit I got married in, and the suit, if I can keep my weight down, probably the suit I'll be buried in. That's it right there. That's the suit I have. But I show you this picture to brag a little bit, but also to tell you that that's what we do in education, that you can take a street kid from a place like Hell's Kitchen, New York, and put him in the East Room of the White House. In America, that's what we call the American dream, but that doesn't only apply to America. That's the dream in every country I ever get to visit, that you can take a kid, give him an education, and create a life for him. Now, here's the thing we often don't think about in education, that the impact that we have on students goes on for generations and generations, that the impact that you have on students, whether you teach for 2 years or 20 years or 40 years, goes on and impacts students that you will never meet in your whole life. Because now I have my kids. I have a 25-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 3-year-old. That's right. Some of you are realizing I can only handle one child at a time. I like it that way. But my 25-year-old is living in New York City, a block from where I grew up in Hell's Kitchen, New York, working at CNN, living her dream. And we never talked about, she graduated from college 3 years ago, and we never talked about college. We never had a conversation about whether she's going to go to college or not. She just assumed she's going to go to college. She assumed she was going to go to graduate school because I went to graduate school, and her mother's a teacher, and she went to graduate school. She assumed I was going to pay for it, but we took care of that pretty quickly. My 16-year-old and I are having conversations today about what his higher education experience is going to be like. They don't think about the fact that they get to live the life that they live because of my 4th grade teacher and my 6th grade teacher and my 9th grade teacher and my college professors. That's the impact that we have. It goes on for generations and generations and generations. Because at the end of the day, what we need to do, what we're really doing is preparing kids for the future. But we also have to realize at the same time, as has been mentioned a couple of times this morning, is that the future's already here. That we are no longer preparing kids for jobs that look like this. These jobs were plentiful in the Industrial Revolution. They just don't exist anymore. Now, I'm not one of those education reformers that will tell you that school is bad and education is bad and we need to revamp the whole thing. I believe we've done some amazing things with education. Also, I'm not someone who can stand up here and tell you education is broken because it worked for me. And I meet thousands of people every year who come up to me and say, I grew up the way you grew up and education did this for me. It's that we need to realize that we don't live in this world anymore, that we are no longer preparing kids for the jobs that look like this. And instead, the future has to do with digitalization. We talked about the fourth economy, the digitalization economy, and what that means, and how jobs of the future are completely changing. And the language of that is computer science. And I'm not saying that everyone needs to go out and become a computer scientist, but we have to realize that this is the language that we now use for everything that we do, and that we have to make sure that we're focused on this. And this is not just a United States issue. If you look at the index, Accenture and Oxford Economics put this together in terms of whether countries are ready for this new revolution, if countries are ready for taking on digitalization. In America, for example, we have 529 open computer science jobs available in the country. And I wrote this down because I wanted to share it with you because it's so important. 521,000 open jobs in computer science, and only 49,000 people in America graduated with a computer science degree. You can see even we have this huge gap. And according to this report, only 2 countries, the US and UK, are really prepared for this digitalization economy. And that other countries need to pick up to get to the point where they're ready for a digitalized economy. Now, the role of digitalization in education has been happening for a very long time. We've been talking about computers in education for a long time. In the early 1900s, motion pictures were going to revolutionize education. All we had to do is put people in theaters like this, and they would just watch movies and get educated. In the 1950s, we talked about television revolutionizing education. And we've been talking about computers in education since at least the 60s. I remember I took a computer class when I was in 9th grade. I was told that computers were going to be important in my future. And I took a computer class, and I learned how to program in BASIC. Any BASIC programmers in the room? All right. We got to bring that language back. So I learned how to program in BASIC, and maybe some of you took this program. Maybe it was a global program in the United States. I talk about this, and it reminds people of this program. I learned how to program in BASIC, and I wrote 5,000 lines of code to make a bird fly across the screen on a Commodore 64. You guys remember that? It wasn't a bird. It was just a line that just went back and forth like this across the screen. So we've been talking about this for a long time. Why are we still talking about it? Why are we talking about it with even more of an emphasis? Well, I think a couple of things are going on. One, we have so much great research on the science of learning. We know what good learning looks like. Sylvia talked about active learning. We know what good learning is. It has to be relevant, engaging, personal. We know these things. We just haven't really been able to implement some of these ideas on the scale that we have in an education system, where you have one teacher facing 30 or 50 kids. We can now use technology to make some of that relevant and engaging. We can use it for kids to drive personal learning. Not personalized learning, personal learning. So that's one. Two, unlike when I took that computer class in 9th grade, I'd never seen a computer before. And I think it was another 10 years before I saw another one. Today, technology's wrapped itself around the core of everything that we do, and we don't even recognize it anymore. For example, how many of you have not used technology today? How many of you have not used the web? Oh, there's one person here. She left her phone at home. How many of you have not used the web today? Right? How long did it take us to get to this point? The iPhone is 10 years old. The BlackBerry, anyone have a BlackBerry? The BlackBerry, there's one kind of BlackBerry user. The BlackBerry users like, you're going to take this thing out of my cold, dead hands. They just love that thing so much. That's 13 years old. Do you remember we used to have to call the internet with our home phones? and the internet was busy, and you were okay with that. You were like, oh, the internet's busy. I'll just try later. And what was your reward when you got online? It was a bunch of pages with words to other pages that had words. And this was impressive to you. And every once in a while, someone would post a picture of one of those sites, and you tell everyone in the room, gather, there's going to be a picture on my computer screen. And that line would just go back. All right, come back in half an hour, there's going to be a picture on my computer screen. And today, what's your expectation with technology? I was a little bit frustrated that my technology wasn't working very well as I'm traveling through space over the ocean on my way here. Our expectations of change in the use of technology, and if that's true for us, many of us who are the generation that was minding our own business when the internet thing showed up, what do you think that means for a generation of kids who don't know what the world looked like before Google and all the other things that they used, before smartphones and tablets and laptops, before Wi-Fi? I remember the world before Wi-Fi. Tell a 10-year-old kid that you're going to go stay at a place that doesn't have Wi-Fi. And they're going to be like, what? Where, are we staying in a cave? Where are we going? I don't understand. As a matter of fact, you check into every hotel that we've checked into, the first thing they give you is what? The Wi-Fi code. Is there a no, there's no bathroom in your room, but here's the Wi-Fi code. Now, it's important to point out that I'm not saying that this generation is different than we are. I'm not saying that they are somehow superhuman, that somehow they're born with technology, therefore they know how to use these tools. They don't know how to use these tools. As a matter of fact, I would be careful of anyone who tells you this generation is wired different. They're not. They can multitask and do 3 things. No, they can't. They do 2 things at the same time poorly, just like we do 2 things at the same time poorly. But how they think about learning is different because of the world they're born into. It's just natural. They think about learning in a different way than we think about learning because of the way we are taught. How do we take advantage of that? This is a picture of my 16-year-old, and this is about when he was 13, and he comes in my room, in my office, with his laptop and a bunch of code. And he's like, I got a bug, I can't fix it, I've been working on it for 2 hours, help me fix this bug. And I made him take a step back so I could take this picture, not because he had a bug, but because I had no idea he was coding. No idea that he was doing this for months, that he was teaching himself how to code. I mean, think about this. I work at Google and he wasn't asking me where he should learn how to code. He was just learning how to code. Him and his friends were running some servers and he was just teaching himself how to code. How do we take advantage of that? How do we take advantage of the fact that they have that curiosity and that they have the world's information at their fingertips? And I'm not talking about just browsing through websites, I'm talking about learning. How do they use these tools to learn? Because if we think about this generation, what they're facing, it's a little daunting. In the United States, if you watch international news, and I've been watching international news, and again, I apologize for what's happening, but if you watch international news, you see a lot of America talking about bringing back American jobs. But what most people don't realize is that we only lost 15% of jobs to trade. Most of our jobs have been lost to things that look like this, where you don't see human beings anymore working on things. And so we're preparing kids for a world where this is happening. And if we think that maybe there are jobs that people do, there's a good chance that those jobs are going to be done by things that look like this. And if we have jobs that are working currently today, there's going to be a good chance that automation is going to impact those jobs as well. In the United States, for example, 4.5 million people make a living driving something. Driving supplies, driving people. Somebody drives me to the airport. Somebody drives me on a plane. Somebody drives me on a train. And you can buy a self-driving car today. I know a legislator in Arizona who literally sits in his car and reads the newspaper because he just puts his car in auto and that's how he gets to work. You can do that today. What's this going to look like in 10 years? Now, all jobs are being impacted. It's not just, kids having to face an automated world. All jobs are being impacted. We can see this in all our lives today. You walk into a supermarket in the United States, and I've seen them here as well, where you walk in and you see all the cashiers working the cashiers, and they're processing information. They're taking your can, they're scanning it, and they're putting it in a bag, and they're watching you use the keypad. And you can see today in supermarkets the self-service checkout lanes, where you can check yourself out. What's going to happen when things like this happen, where Amazon's creating stores where you don't even need the checkout lanes? You can just take things off the shelf and put them in your bag and walk out of the store. Does this mean that all grocery store and supermarket jobs are going away? No, it means that all cashier jobs are going away. What it means is that we need to think about the adaptability of students to be able to do other jobs in those spaces. For example, I don't know how it is here in Spain or how it is in your country, but in the United States, if you walk into a giant supermarket, you can't find anyone to help you find something because they're all busy working the checkout lanes. Imagine instead walking in a supermarket and seeing people in the aisles that can help you. But they're not cashiers, they're not low-level skills, they're dietitians, they're nutritionists, they're food experts, they're cooks, and they're there to help you. What are you cooking tonight? Let me show you this. Let me walk you over my demo station. Let's do this together. Let's work on this. They're providing a higher level of service. This is happening across the board. The same thing happened in banking. When's the last time you walked into a bank and filled out the little form with that pen that's doing a life sentence, and you go through the aisle and you get to the front and you say to the bank teller, "I would like $20 in cash, please." They take a minute, right? They're like, "I'm sorry, is this a bank robbery? I don't understand what's going on." We don't do that. We use ATMs if we use cash at all. There are people in this room right now who have no cash in their pocket at all. But here's the thing. There are more people working in banks today than there were when ATMs were introduced. They're just doing a different job. And that's what we need to prepare our kids for, jobs that don't exist. And this is impacted across everything. This is not just kids with no education. This is not just kids in the middle or professionals in the middle. This is everything. The first 25 years ago, when I walked into work and I started using a computer, I was using an automated process. When I used a calculator, I was using an automated thing. This is happening across the board. It's just happening at a different rate than it's been in the past. And so what we need to do is prepare kids with the skills that they need for this future. Now, I'm going to show you a slide. We did a survey with The Economist. And we asked employers all over the world, because this was for an international education conference that we did in the US. This is about 3 or 4 years ago. And we asked employers all over the world, what are the most important skills that you need your kids to know how to do? And I'm going to show you the results of that survey. But I have to warn you that the most surprising thing about the survey is that it's not surprising at all. It's the same stuff that we've been talking about for years. We talked about it this morning, problem solving, critical thinking, communication, all these things that we talked about. We've been talking about this list for so long, we call them 21st century skills. We are 18 years into the 21st century. My 3-year-old will be around in the 22nd century. Who's going to coin the phrase, building 22nd century skills? It's mine, I already own it, don't try. But because we've been looking at this list for so long, and we think about the old world, not the new world, we're still asking old questions, and what we need to do is ask new questions. And I want to give you a couple of examples of what that looks like. For example, one of the things that we still ask students today is, what do you want to be when you grow up? All of you are guilty of that. What do you want to be? Get it said. What are you going to be when you grow up? That question makes no sense. That question used to make sense when we were kids, but it doesn't make sense anymore. Jobs are being created every day. Jobs are being adapted every day. Things are changing. People are having 9, 10, 11 different careers in their lifespan. Doesn't make sense. Let's stop asking that question. Instead, what we should be asking students is, what problem do you want to solve? What's the problem that spins in your head? 2 things. One, it doesn't have to be a global problem. It doesn't have to be solving world hunger. It could be making better cars. It could be making better machinery. It could be making better light bulbs. Whatever it is, my daughter's problem is she wants to tell better stories. She wants a Latina version of storytelling. That's her problem that she wants to solve. And 2, the problem changes over time. It's not the actual problem that they're going to solve for the rest of their life. It's the process of problem solving that they're learning to think about. Because the more important question isn't what problem you want to solve. The more important question is, what do you need to learn to solve that problem? What are the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities that you need to solve that problem? How can you start developing those knowledge, skills, and abilities? How can you start working on that today? What projects could you be working on? Who could you be collaborating with? It's about problem solving. And we run the Google Science Fair, and every year we have all these contestants, these 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds solving problems. The girl there in the middle is one of my favorite. She had a problem that she wanted to solve. She had a friend who lived in the Philippines, and her friend didn't have electricity. So she invented a flashlight that's powered by the heat of the human hand. And she was 15 years old when she did it.
Wow!
Yeah, exactly. Now, if you're watching the news in the United States, those kids in Florida, you see what problem they're trying to solve and the impact that they're having on things in the US. The capacity and potential and capability that our kids have is amazing if we just give them the opportunity to show us what they can do. We want our kids to critically think, but we give them endpoints. We give them things like grades, B's and C's. What's the C in journalism? You get 70% of the facts right? And that's okay. Critical thinking comes from making things. It comes from building things. It comes from seeing what works and what doesn't work. And there is no endpoint anymore. There is no C. Here's the end. It's constant and consistent iteration, because that's the world that we live in today. If you used Google last night and used it again today, you probably used a different version of Google, because we updated 600 plus times a year. We're constantly moving forward. There is no more endpoints. And so how do we teach, through maker movements, through other things, how to constantly build things and give feedback? Because it's about the feedback, it's about the assessment of the feedback, it's not about the letter grades anymore. We talk about collaboration in education, but we don't mean it. Because the current system, which again served our economy, our industrial revolution economy very well, is an individualized sport. The problem is we live in a team-based world. It's my 16-year-old who's responsible for his grades, his tests, his assignments, and he's supposed to go out and work with others. Imagine a typical 9th level test where it's not a quiz. I'm a big fan of quizzes, but standardized tests that we know that a kid memorizes for, and 3 months later we know they don't remember anything on the test anyway, so I don't know why we do it, but let's say we're doing one of those tests. And at the end of the test, you're the teacher, and at the end of the test, 2 kids from the back of the room come up to you and they say, we were sitting back there and we realized that she knew some of the answers and I knew some of the answers, and so we decided to collaborate together and work on this together. What would your reaction be? Why are we teaching kids that collaborating is cheating? Flip that into my world. Flip it into your world. I go to Sundar, the CEO at Google, and I say, here's the education plan for 2018. I did it all by myself. Oh, I'm sorry, did I work with anybody on the team? No, I swear, I didn't work with anybody. Did I get feedback and stakeholder input? No. My parents did not help me with this. This is all me. How many more minutes would I have my job? We live in a world of collaboration. That's how things get done. How do we teach kids real collaboration skills? The ability to listen, to ask questions, the ability to question things, the ability to build consensus, the ability to influence. One of the things that we look for at Google is called leadership. One of the 4 categories is leadership. Do you think by leadership we mean, can you tell people what to do and they'll just follow you blindly? No, we're asking, can you influence? Can you build consensus? Can you take a step back and let someone else lead? So how do we build these things into our models of education? And I think the most important thing we need, more than plans or anything, is a culture shift, to think about education from a different perspective. To understand that the old education system served the old world very well, and what we need to do is take the best ideas of education and think about the future and create the education of the future to match that future. For example, it is no longer about putting information in kids' heads. They have the information. It's about what we do with that information that makes sense. How do we take that information and make sense of it? How do we take the amount of information that kids are getting and make sense of that information, to create original thought, to build things, to do the things that they need to do? So we need a culture shift. We need to move away from what we currently used to do and create new models where kids are building their learning, they're driving their learning, they're in control of their learning, where technology is not the silver bullet. Technology is going to come and go. Technology is going to continuously advance. We worry too much about technology. It's not about technology. Technology is not the silver bullet. Great education is the silver bullet. Technology is there to support and enable what the great learning looks like, but it's not the silver bullet. It's not going to save anything. How do we create models where kids are building things together, they're working on things together, they're working on projects together, and that teachers are there to support and enable what they do? Because at the end of the day, when that door closes in a classroom, especially for kids who are growing up the way I grew up, nothing is more important than having a great teacher in that classroom. How do we make sure that they have the knowledge, the skills, and abilities that they need to create the models of the future? How, if you're a leader in education, and in the United States, one of my favorite things to do is to go yell at superintendents, how to make sure that we're giving teachers the space that they need, that they're giving they have the resources that they need, that they have the commitment and the space to do what they think is right, because they're the ones who need to create what that future looks like. And so we need to move away from a model that served us really, really well for a very long time. In the United States, I like to tell people, and we can do this in the industrial world as well, that we built a super world based on the education system that we had for a very long time, and it served us very well. How do we do that? How do we move to the new model where kids are making things and building things, and teachers are coaches, and that they're up and moving and doing things? And we know that this is what works. Active learning is what works. We know this. And that technology, whatever technology it looks like, is there to support and enable what we do. I'll give you a Google example of what this looks like. This is the original Google.com. This is Larry and Sergey putting a bunch of machines together and doing Google. And then this is what Google looks like today. One row of the gazillions of rows of servers that we have all over the world. And there's two things I want to point out. First, this can happen anywhere today. You don't need to be in Palo Alto, California. Any kids in any of your countries have more computing power than Larry and Sergey ever dreamed of having. They can make and build anything. And two, this is not what a data center is going to look like in 19 years. There is no future data center, just like there is no future education. There's just every day. It's the next light bulb, the next casing, the next thing. And the same thing is true with this. This took 19 years to get from here to there. We need 19 years to think about. So as I close out here, and I only got a minute left, I want to make sure we understand that we're at the very beginning of this. This is the most exciting time in education because we are at the beginning. We are the generation that's going to transform what learning looks like. It took electricity 50 years to catch on. Can you imagine there were people saying, that electricity thing, that's a fad. I don't want that. Edison had his plant up and running in 1884, and it took 20 years to get 4 companies to use electricity. They weren't buying it. It wasn't until they changed their models that they could take advantage of electricity where they started seeing the benefit of it. We need to change the models in education so we can start seeing how we take advantage of the education, of the technology in the education system. So the last thought I want to leave you with, I want you to think about whatever technology it is that you have, whether it's your iPad, your MacBook, your Chromebook, whatever it is that you have, your Apple 10. For me, it's the Pixel 2. Anyone have a Pixel 2? The most innovative technology from the most innovative company in the world? Just kidding. So think about this, and I want you to think about a 5-year-old. And then I want you to realize that this is the worst technology that 5-year-old will ever see in her life. This is her Commodore 64. In 20 years, she's going to find this in a 50-cent box. She's going to want to buy it to bring home to put on her shelf like a museum piece, because she's going to say, my dad had one of these. And she's going to want to put on her shelf like a museum piece. And she's going to say, look, you guys, she's going to be with younger friends. She's going to say, look, there's the port right there, right there. And she's going to say, you're not going to believe me, but this is true. My dad had to plug this into the wall. And the other kids are going to be like, wait, what? Like, plug it in, activate the nuclear battery, and then she's up. No. Every day. For hours, this thing was plugged in the wall. Those are the kids who are coming into our school system. Those 5-year-olds are coming into our school system. Are we ready for them? Do we have the right models in place? How do we use technology to create those models? How do we use technology to support those models so that the kids can build the knowledge, the skills, and abilities that they need to solve the problems that they're going to be interested in solving? That's why I hope we gather at events like this. Thank you guys very much.